Hey everybody, and welcome once again to Nose in the Book, a Bible reading commentary with me, your host, Pastor Justin Van Reed. So great to have you with me once again as we take a look at 4 more chapters from the Word of God. We have before us today Judges chapter 14, from the book of Acts chapter 18, from Jeremiah chapter 27, and from the Gospel of Mark chapter 13. So we've got Judges 14, Acts 18, Jeremiah 27, and Mark 13. All right, let's jump right into these 4 chapters. First off, in Judges chapter 14, we're continuing on with the story of Samson, which was introduced last time in chapter 13. And so Samson here, he's a bit of a womanizer, and so he sees this Philistine girl, and he wants her. He wants to marry her. So he, basically tells his parents, "That's the one I want. Get her for me." And they're kind of like, with all the fish in the Israelite river, you got to go, fishing in the Philistine river. And Samson says, "Yeah, I want her." And so as they're traveling to the Philistines, along the way, without his parents knowing, Samson wrestles a lion and actually kills it. Says it was just like a goat, just crushes this lion, showing the strength of Samson. And later on, when they're coming back for the wedding, he's going to secretly pass by this lion carcass, and there's honey. The bees have made a hive inside the carcass of the lion, and so Samson takes some of the honey and eats it. And so this would be unclean, which means that he's now broken that first command there, not to eat anything unclean here from the eating from the carcass of a lion, from a dead animal. Anyway, they go on to the Philistines, and he gets this girl, and he's gonna marry her. They're having basically a big wedding feast and reception and everything, and so Samson tells them a riddle, and they don't know the answer. They can't figure out the answer to his riddle. He's referring to the lions, that he ate the honey out of. How could they ever know that? So the people of the city, they go to Samson's new wife, his Philistine wife, and she begs him for the answer. He finally gives her the answer, and so she goes back and tells them the answer. And so before time's up, they report to Samson, "Here's your answer." And Samson says, "If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle." Not a very nice thing to say about your new wife. So then he has to pay off, his end of this bargain here, because they solved his riddle. So he kills 30 other Philistines to provide the 30 sets of clothes. So that's Judges chapter 14, and the beginning here of Samson's very fascinating story. All right, moving to the book of Acts. Right now for something completely different from Samson here. Acts chapter 18, and Paul and his travels here, still finishing up his second missionary journey. He goes to Corinth, and he's actually going to spend a year and a half there. The Lord is very clear to him, that this is a place that I want you to be. Spend some time here, build a church here, and Corinth needs a lot of help, and so Paul spends a lot of time there. He meets Aquila and Priscilla while he's there, husband and wife team for the Lord, and as is his custom, he's ministering to the Jews. When they reject, he goes to the Gentiles. So you've got another Jewish-Gentile mixed church. And then after Corinth, he travels back, visits a few more places, goes to Jerusalem, then goes up, finishes the second missionary journey, returning to Antioch of Syria, and then almost immediately sets out on his third journey, visiting some of the churches he's been to and established before in his previous missionary journeys. Meanwhile, we learn about this man named Apollos, who doesn't have the full understanding here of the message of Christ, and so Aquila and Priscilla instruct him in the things of the Lord more clearly, and Apollos is then going to become another pillar in the early church and a partner with Paul. So Acts chapter 18 Again, the conclusion of Paul's second missionary journey, spending a lot of time in Corinth, meeting Priscilla and Aquila, traveling back to Antioch, and Apollos being instructed by Aquila and Priscilla. All right, Jeremiah chapter 27 is next, and here Jeremiah continuing to with his messages concerning the fact that Israel is headed for exile, that the Babylonians are going to rule over them. This time, God again tells Jeremiah to do something that will illustrate the truth of his messages, that what is coming. He has him wear a yoke, an ox yoke, and go around to the various leaders, not just of Judah, but of the nations that are in the region there around Judah, to tell them one by one that God is sending, right, that all of these nations, just like animals, belong to the Lord, and the Lord can decide who he wants to rule, and so he's chosen the Babylonians. So the Babylonians, they're all going to basically be slaves to the Babylonians. It's a picture of the ox yoke. They're gonna have to work for the Babylonians. They're gonna be under the control of the Babylonians, and then he goes to the king, tells him the same thing. He goes to the priests and the people, tells them the same thing. They can live if they submit to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, because this is God's doing. This is God's plan. This is what God has intended here for the people, and so of course it's really cool to see again here in Jeremiah 27 how these messengers are coming one after the other, and the Lord is giving them opportunity to listen, and sending Jeremiah. But will the people respond? Will the people listen? All right, that's what we've got for Jeremiah 27. Then last we have Gospel of Mark chapter 13, and here this is similar to Matthew chapter 24 and 25. Jesus here, remember, in his last week of his life here in Jerusalem, tells his disciples that who are enthralled by the temple buildings. They say, look at these magnificent buildings. Look at the impressive stones. And Jesus says it's not that impressive. He says these great buildings, you see these, they'll be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another. And so they come to the Mount of Olives, and Jesus teaches his disciples, because they ask, when will this happen, and what will be the sign that these things are about to be fulfilled? And so Jesus goes through a number of, really it's a two-part thing, I think, that's going on here that Jesus is mixing. His answer, right, because their question is, when will this happen, and what will be the signs that all this will be fulfilled? And Jesus, what he's going to refer to here, because the destruction of the temple is 70 AD, but he's going to, all of these things being fulfilled. There's an overlap between 70 AD, when the Romans came and sacked Jerusalem and destroyed it, tore down the temple and the walls of the city, and the return of Christ. There's a parallel here, and so Jesus, in answering, does something that's very common in prophetic writings. He's going to mix his response between what is going to happen in 70 AD, very soon, just a few decades after his death and resurrection, ascension, and now some 2,000 years later, and his return. And so Jesus, explains life will be like it was in the days of Noah, where everybody was just kind of living their lives, not expecting anything to happen, and then suddenly, boom, destruction. Same 70 AD and his return. Right? People were just going on thinking, okay, this is just life, and then there's a black swan event. Something major happens. Something unexpected happens. In this case, either 70 AD or the return of Christ. He talks about how they're, the normal order of life up until the end. There's gonna be persecution. You're gonna go and you're gonna preach this message. There's gonna be wars. There's gonna be famines. All of these things happen in Israel up until 70 AD, but they also happen down throughout history leading up to the return of Christ. And then he goes on to describe the judgment that actually comes, both in 70 AD and at his return. And his message, though, ultimately, and this is consistent through the New Testament when referring to the end, is not being so concerned about, okay, when is it going to happen, when is it going to happen, but being prepared, always being prepared for when that day comes. And so are you prepared? Are you prepared? If it were today, if Jesus were to return today, do you know that you're prepared to meet him, that this would be a joyous day? I hope you do. All right, that's all we have time for today. Again, we had Judges chapter 14, Acts chapter 18, Jeremiah 27, and Mark chapter 13. Thanks for being with me these last few minutes. Until next time, keep your eyes on the Lord and your nose in the book. We'll see you again soon.